This is an auspicious occasion to have all these guys here. Wow, what a pleasurable weekend this is going to be, and it has been so far. The occasion itself is the Long Beach Internationals, which is an offshoot, if you will, of Ed Parker's International Championships. It's not the same because Ed Parker's not here, but it's about as good as you're going to get because with the people carrying it on, and they're trying their darndest, and they're doing a good job at the table. And we've got a table full of people, Kenpoists, and in the background also we got the gunners here. I got to tell you, my lady Miss Laney is here, and Dave Gigliotti, and I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves because you're going to get into the background too. Next is
Sibora.
I'm Sibora Chan.
Read the cue cards.
Yep, Angelo Collado. Hello, everybody.
And Tom Bleeker.
Dan Dodfro.
Brian Sahl.
Dan Meck.
Stacy Picascia. Now to the
now
back of the room.
into the
Stand
background.
up and introduce yourself. Starting over here.
Go. Oh. Elizabeth Corman. Sally Schweitzer.
Team, I'm Nathan Murphy. Norm Lane and my wife Susan. Greg Satterfield.
And that does it.
All right.
So much for dinner with Chuck. Yeah, we used to have this thing with the actual dinner, but it was just too hard talking with a mouthful of spaghetti, and slopping all over the place. It was fun, but we actually had a heck of a good time between dinner and now. You should have been here for that. There were some great stories told. Where are we going from here? I mean, there's no set no set agenda, so we probably ought to reiterate some of the stories that we were telling during the time in between then and now.
We're all empty now.
Well, you're going to the internationals on Saturday to do what?
We're going to promote Mohammed Tabatabai and myself and Steve Mohammed are going to promote Lex Lexenberg, long-time, old-time Kenpoist, big guy, sweetheart, who I understand can't make it because of a broken leg.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Whether he'll actually make it or not, I don't. I rather doubt it. But that's the rain that must fall into each person's life. Well, that's his bit of rain for this time. Other than that, we're going down there. Steve Mohammed is running a seminar from 9 to 10:30 in the morning. I'll be there for that. And we're also going to give Steve his award for the Hall of Fame, which he received 2 years ago. He's a member of the Hall of Fame now. And I nominated him at that time, and he was accepted. And naturally, Steve was the winningest fighter of all times. Won more championships than anybody. It was a rare day when he walked out of there without something in his hand to show for his time. We've known them all. I go back to the really early days. Mr. Bleeker was teaching for Ed Parker and I at our studio on Crenshaw Boulevard when he was how old, Tom? 15, 16?
Oh, no. I was in 65. I was 19. I got my black belt in 65, and I was black when I was there, right? Just got my black.
Yes, just got
so
it.
it was. I would have been 19. I'm born in 46. 19.
Okay.
Acted 15.
But then, of course,
Is that your final answer?
You had to come up to black belt, so you were between then and when we actually met, you were just a kid.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
when we met, I was 16. We met in 62.
Yeah.
I was 16 years old, and you were a brown belt.
Yes.
And by the way, I think I mentioned this to you. I was your first brown belt.
Yep.
Because you were teaching the advanced class at the West LA's at the Santa Monica School, and I was the first brown belt there. And on my certificate, it says Instructor Chuck Sullivan.
And there's a story about when
Dick wasn't there.
no, right. Anyhow, there's a story about I was teaching as a brown belt, and then I got black belt in Pasadena, and of course that was a world apart. West LA and Pasadena didn't know what was going on, so I walked into the dojo wearing a black belt. Tell them what happened.
we all knew that Chuck was, had a great sense of humor. Because he's a barber, and every barber knows all the jokes, and so he has a great sense of humor. And I've been to the parties here at not this house, the other house. So I saw him walk in with a gi with a black belt around it. And I assumed that Ed Parker was with him, and he just had Ed Parker's gi, and he was taking his gi, and he was heading back to the dressing room. And that's all I knew. I didn't pay attention. All of a sudden, he steps out with a black belt on. And I thought, this is not funny. Because we had a thing back there was that you never wore another belt. I have the joke that's on the YouTube called Confession, my confession. But you didn't even put on a higher belt just to look how you looked in it. You didn't do it. I mean, that was really a bad thing. And Ed Parker's gi used to hang in the back with the black belt on it, and we used to walk past it and grab the sleeve of the gi top and hit ourselves with it because it had this mystical power.
Yeah, the
belt. I thought he was joking. I honestly thought he was joking. And then he said, all right, everybody line up and on. He started. Then I realized that he was a black belt. But I was a because back then, there weren't any black belts except Ed Parker, and he was a third degree.
Right, that was after the split.
Yes,
That was
and
after
so the idea that anybody could have a black belt beside Ed Parker was just out of question.
Oh.
I mean, the goal was to make brown.
Right. The goal was to make
The
brown.
goal was to make brown and
Make
get in
brown.
that, get in the
Who you were.
Pasadena brown belt class.
And no one expected to ever make black?
Well, we knew that we would. Yes, because there had been some black belts made, and there had been 3 before me. And it was Rich Montgomery was first, Jimmy Brown was second, and Richard Flores was third. And I remember asking Jimmy Ebrow because Ed Parker said he was his first black belt at his
What does that mean?
that's not testimonial.
At the tribute.
At the tribute, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ed Parker actually said, "Here's Jimmy. I want to introduce Jimmy, but my first black belt." And I knew he wasn't his first black belt. Jimmy knew he wasn't his first. I said, "What did you think when he said that?" He says, "I damn near fell off my chair." But Ed would do that. He just, if it sounded good at the time, he put it out there.
Was it
I
intentional?
think that the picture is
Oh.
going sideways.
Hang on one second.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
we're on the wrong account.
For that one, yes.
Oh, how can we get on the right account?
I don't know.
Does anyone
That's the
Okay.
message.
All right.
She said, okay, it looks as if both are on.
They're both on.
Yeah, that was her last
Okay,
message.
that's it. We're
From your
good.
sweet Janine.
However,
Watch it out,
however,
Shane.
is the picture sideways on the broadcast? Does the camera need to be rotated? Because I thought I saw someone said that in the.
No, it's
It
great.
says the picture is showing sideways.
I'll
Yeah,
ask
we've
her.
had that problem before.
I'll ask
too.
her.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Tilt your head if
With
you
all
slide
these,
it.
with all these heads together, put all these heads together.
Get your head
We got a
together.
full head of hair between all of
Let's
us.
do the rest of it like this.
Get your V8s ready, and we'll figure it out.
Right. Check the Brotherhood page.
You
real quick,
recall
see
what
how you're
happened at
seeing it.
at Bally's Hotel with us with Al Tracy when we went up there for the Journey book debut,
No, it's-
and Al and I got into that huge argument about who was the first black belt.
No.
Sideways, yeah.
Yeah, we were going up the line, and Al exploded when I mentioned it. He said, "Oh, good to see you," and all that. And I said, somehow it came up, and I said, "Yeah, the history chapter, and the first black belt was Rich Montgomery," and Al went absolutely crazy. I mean,
Now
he
we
was
can
really
read it.
angry. And we went out, and you said, "Well, we'll figure this out right now." And we walked up to Jimmy Ebrow, and you said, "Hey, Jimmy, what's this about Jimmy?" He said, "I don't say that. Other people say that." Right? You remember that?
Yeah. Another thing Al Tracy would not remember is we got our black belts our brown belts on the same night.
That's right.
There was only 2 of us. It was Al Tracy and myself. And you ask him who was there, he wouldn't remember me. I was somebody that came along after the fact.
Years later.
Years later,
Yeah.
yeah. But he and I got our brown belts the same night. So, but Jim was ahead of us, and would have been. I was the 4th black belt in the system, only because those other guys split. I would probably have been somewhere about 8th, 10th, maybe something like that. But because they lost their place in history.
So can I
They
ask?
never
Can I ask a
reappeared?
question? So So what you just told us is that other than Ed Parker, Chuck Sullivan was the first black belt that you would ever met in your training. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, that's an interesting piece of
That's
history.
correct. I
Yeah,
haven't
that's,
seen
that's
anybody but you with a black belt and Ed Parker. That was it. All the other guys were gone. They weren't coming in. They weren't
No.
coming around.
No.
So this was what you said, like 65?
62.
62?
62.
Yeah. That was a studio where Nick Adams showed it. Remember Nick Adams, the actor? We showed up one night in his buckskins with his 6 guns, the whole thing, everything with the horse. And he was watching a demonstration put on by Ed Parker. I'll never forget that one in particular because it was a night that Jim Murray was the columnist for the LA Times. And he was a big-time columnist. Everybody read Jim Murray. I mean, he was real popular. And somebody had invited him down. He worked for the Times. And they said, I can get Jim Murray to come down here and do an interview with you. And Ed Parker says, bring him on. That's great. So Jim Murray was there. And I remember him asking Ed, he says, well, Mr. Parker, can you describe your art in a few words, succinctly? And Ed thought for a second. He says, yes. It's organized, scientific, dirty fighting. And I thought that was the best description of it I ever heard.
That's
Yeah,
great.
perfect.
That's great.
Because back in those days, if you kicked a guy in a bar, you'd liable to get the whole bar jumping on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that was dirty fighting.
Yeah.
A few years later, when it became a martial art, people look at it and say, nice kick. But at any time before that, that would have been dirty fighting, and you could have got in trouble for it. But that's exactly that's how I described it for years, and still do, because we've taken it back to that.
It's
We
perfect.
put all the nastiness back inside. So
That's one thing we've talked about, even like the big UFC and the MMA stuff. All the stuff that they do that they're not allowed to do in the octagon is the stuff that we teach. I'm going to
Yes.
bite your ear
Yes.
off and rip
Yes.
your nose off.
what's the
and-
first thing you can do? What you can't do in the MMA.
Exactly.
Or any kickboxing or anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a fantastic story about that. It's one of our guys who trained with us, got his black belt with us, and it's Kenpo all the way. Trained for 2.5 years in MMA. Got so ingrained in it that he finally, when he got into it, he came out. Well, I tell you, it was a draw.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a couple of big guys, and he got nicked up pretty good. I asked him, what happened? He told me. Got into it. He explained how and why. And I finally looked at him and I said, you couldn't kick him in the groin? Out of our 55 techniques, 21 of them, the first move is a kick to the groin. 21 out of 55. And that's including, I mean, just, that's my guy. And then there's 8 more that haven't incorporated. That's our favorite target, our go-to target, our first target.
Yes.
Every time. You know what his answer was? It never occurred to me. So right there,
Old
just, I
faithful.
mean, cross training can be great, and it can be deadly. It really can be. It depends on what you're doing and so on. But you start training rules. What's our rule? What's the only rule we have?
There are no rules.
There are no rules. Survival. Just
But you
get-
see these MMA guys now, they come into the MMA or UFC or whatever the case may be, 5 years of experience, and the skill level that they achieve in such, just from doing the real deal,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yes,
but,
it is.
But you're right, it's framed. There's a
Yeah.
framework to it that we go
They
outside.
would freak out if we kicked them in the groin.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be like, what'd you do?
Yeah.
You can't do that. I just did.
yeah. It just, yeah.
There are those, however, who say that a good fighter, a great fighter, can win under any rules as long as the rules apply to everybody, their opponents. Ben Urquidez has said that.
Yeah.
That you don't have any of those rules in kickboxing, but he said with my opponent, the same rules apply to him that apply to me. And if I'm a great fighter, I should be able to beat anybody as long as the rules are the same. The
Yeah.
rules are the same are for me, but not for my opponent. That's another story.
Yeah.
But I think that's some people make that point, and I don't know if that's not worth considering.
I heard a statement once which I thought was pretty cool, which was that those who train in the art can transfer to the sport, that those who train in the sport cannot transfer to the art.
That's good.
You know,
That's good.
and that was something
but what happened to that guy that transferred in the art and then, transferred over and couldn't carry it over? But then he decided to drop that completely, go back to his Kenpo, and now he's 100% Kenpo. And
Yeah.
I know the first thing you do if you got into it, you go right for the groin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think about like this like Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather thing? You have 2 different backgrounds, same rules, same rules in the same ring.
Yeah, but they're trained entirely different.
Very differently, yeah.
I mean, Connor had no business getting in
None.
the ring with Mayweather. Mayweather's the greatest boxer that ever lived. I mean, you know, the greatest technician. And he had no business, but he got a great paycheck. You know, and that's sure
Yeah.
why he did it.
Paycheck.
Yes. Yes.
I had an interesting thought about the international because we both fought in the first internationals along with, who else fought? Bob Cook, Dan Inosanto, Hebler. You know, back in '64, if you could fight and you were a brown or a black, you signed up. That was it.
That was 56 years ago.
Yeah,
But-
Danny and I had a fight for third place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was surprised because when I went down there, I was convinced we were going to take them all. We were going to take every single trophy, every division, everything in that tournament. I believe that because that's what I was told in my training. You know, early on, this is the best system. I said we've got that, and you know, all these guys are going there, and I was surprised at all the talent that was there. That was really good.
Yes.
Now, the only guys that we ever fought that I remember was Chuck Norris's guys at the West LA school. We had an inter-school tournament.
Yeah.
But other than that, we didn't fight anybody else. I never saw anybody else. I don't recall ever.
No, I
Fighting
used to
anybody?
bring my guys down, but that was sort of inter-school fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
So when we got down there, I didn't know any of the other systems and styles, and I was surprised how good many of them were.
So let me ask you this. So this is my question. So here you are. It's the 1964 International Karate Championships. It's kind of important. You're competing in this thing. What's going through? Here you are. You're standing there. You're getting ready to go. You're in uniform. Here we go, baby. What's going through your mind at that moment?
In '64?
Yes.
Oh, I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was just, I mean, Chuck would be the one to ask. I was just, I mean, I did well in my division. I took,
56 years.
yeah.
First
Chuck
of
would be
all,
the guy to ask.
I'm asking both of you guys.
Yeah,
both
okay.
of you guys, for sure. Oh, yeah. I'm going to be asking you two a lot of questions.
Well,
tonight.
I
Yeah.
was just overwhelmed to even be there. I'd never seen anything like this. Long Beach Municipal Auditorium and all these guys, and I was fighting. And I fought in, I think, heavyweight brown belt division. That's what was the division I was in. And I did okay, but I didn't win it. But the guy that won that division beat me. But I was just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like that,
I can
and I wasn't
imagine.
expecting to walk into that either.
Right. Very interesting. So how about you? You're competing in the internationals.
Oh, all right.
1964.
Well, first of all, you got to understand what the first internationals were like. It was insane. Chaotic is another word. Yes, totally insane. Nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody had the faintest idea what they were doing. There were guys coming up to Ed Parker with wads of money that should have been entered like days ago. Hey, brother, we from Honolulu. You put us in. Put them in. Where? Wow. What? There's 2 dozen guys. What the hell are you talking about? Put them in. Okay, we'll put them in. You're walking around mostly in a daze. Ed Parker fell on his face down on the floor. He ran out of gas. He hadn't slept for 3 days prior to the thing. He couldn't sleep. He was just so intent on what he was doing and doing it. He'd get in bed and he told me, he's like, I can't sleep at all. I get up, I start typing. I got to do something. So for 3 days, so finally he ran out of gas. And the doctor said, take him back to his room. He said, put me in a chair. I'm not missing my tournament. So they put him in a chair and he watched the tournament. And he looked like death warmed over. I mean, he really looked bad. He passed out. He looked like he passed out. And then they barely revived him. And I remember going to him. Now, we're an hour and a half late getting started. Do you know what it's like now? Wait a minute. First of all, this section of seats at the ringside, they're all paid high money for. They didn't put the numbers on them or the rows, so people were just sitting on them. Hey, that's my seat. Not anymore, motherfucker. This is where my ass is planted, and it's going to stay here, and it did. And pretty soon, chairs are going to start flying on him. He's going to be really bad. And Ronnie Bozarth, who was the MC that year, and he said, when chairs start flying, I'm out of here. And you're going to be minus 1 MC because you better show up your voice. So, you know, and I said to him, finally, I said, you ready? And he says, yeah. Right. I said, well, announce the national anthem. I figured that'd shut him up. So he said to his beautiful baritone voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stand for our national anthem?" And they all stood up. "Oh," say, "can you?" And he said down, he said, "Welcome to the first International Karate Championship." And it took on a life of its own.
That's
But
amazing.
somebody had to say go.
Yeah.
I'm never afraid to say go.
Yeah.
I'll say go before things are ready, rather than afterwards. Get them when they're late.
Wow.
Don't let them get late. Don't just be as much on time as you possibly can. The first international, what was going through our head? Everything and nothing. You were blank and you were packed up with every. They had to come and tell you to fight over here. Well, you fight for a little while, do stuff. I mean, that's how busy we were. We just like I said, we had to fight for third place. And somebody, one of the other two guys that beat us, fought for first and second.
So you couldn't pull out your iPhone to stay organized.
Yeah. You didn't all get a trophy in 1964.
Participation 20.
You didn't. No. Well, that's interesting. That's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was fun, but I tell you, the next day I let down. I had been so keyed up for so long that the following day was it was a Sunday, and I think we only had it on Saturday then, and then later on it was on the Saturday and Sunday.
But you were let down?
Oh yeah,
or just like you crashed energy
Yeah,
wise?
basically I think that was it.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but I mean it was like, well, what do we do now?
You're done.
Ain't nothing to do now.
You didn't plan the next one.
Angelo brought up something.
That's what I pictured.
He asked me about the video that we made about Ed Parker.
Yes.
I called it "The Man Behind the Myth," Ed Parker, and Angelo had a segment. Tom had a segment. Yeah.
And Trejo had a great segment.
Well, I had a great segment.
Of course he did.
Anyhow, it's on our website. One of the 21 must-see videos on KCA website, and I think you probably get to know who Ed Parker is through the guys that were telling the stories. I would just say, tell me your favorite Ed Parker story, and of course you had to know the man, and he had to know you in order for you to have a story. So I mean, I talked to people that knew him and knew him well and knew him intimately. I got Frank Trejo's. Frankie was great. Everybody had just great stories about him, and I think you'd enjoy that. Anybody would.
So was this the video where you said, and this was one of my, a line that you pulled on video that I thought was awesome, where you said, people accused Ed Parker and Kenpo folks of stealing. That's right. If it's good, we're going to steal it. And I was like, I'm watching this video, and I'm like, I'm an Eagles fan. It's like the Eagles scored. I was like, right on, Chuck Sullivan. That's awesome.
What I always say about that is I'm the biggest thief in the world.
Yeah.
If it's good and I can figure out what you're doing, it's mine. You don't have to teach me. I mean, when you've been in this so long, you look at a person and you go, that's nice. I like that. Thank you.
Steal that.
Thank you. I got it now.
Spinning heel kick.
Yeah.
Rear heel kick.
Yeah, the rear heel kick. I'm sitting next to a guy in Chicago at the tournament there, and I've never seen a full-out spinning heel kick done by Koreans. Our spinning heel kick, our back kick was terrible. We had no back kick. It was worse than, forget about it. I mean, looking over one shoulder, kicking over the other. Oh my God, it's just terrible. And I saw that and I went, wow. Involuntarily, I said to the guy next to me, I said, did you see that? That was fantastic. He said, yeah, that's no good. Did you see the same thing I saw? Yeah, he says, you never turn your back on your opponent. That's why a turkey goes. I said, okay. Let me ask you this. How come the guy who turned his back is dancing around and the other guy's in a world of hurt? and he says, no, still no good. He would not accept it. He would not accept it because it violated it. Well, sorry, folks. The guy drops another guy. You got to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to look at that.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful, and what he did, and the guy just never did continue. And I think they had to figure out, was it excessive contact, or did he walk into it, or did he just stand there, or what? I don't think he got a point, but I don't think he got disqualified.
That guy never fought Benny.
Oh. No, Benny back in those days would have killed everybody.
Well, he was the master of the spinning back.
Yeah.
I mean,
He was great.
that was it.
Yep.
Did you ever fight him?
No.
Listen, I'm going to be digging for stories. I know there's some good ones, so.
No, I was much was in a different weight division.
That's what it is. Yeah.
I remember one time George
Unfortunately.
Quinones was, he says, come on, Benny, I'll warm you up. And he's warming him up. And Benny's trying some stuff, and then he's not getting anything. And he's trying some other stuff, and he's not getting anything. And I could actually see it on his face, like, who is this guy? He was having a hell of a time with George. And George was playing with him. And I think if George gotten serious, he'd have gotten killed. But he didn't. He just played with him. But he did really, really well. And he warmed him up nicely. And Benny went on to win, of course.
Gene LaBelle, who wrote the foreword for the Jet book, said that he believed that Benny, and that was, when did the Jet come out? A few years ago? He said at that time that he thought that Benny could step into the ring with anybody in his weight division and still beat him. That's how good he still is.
I believe.
And in great shape.
Yeah.
Well, how old is Benny now, do you think?
He's coming up on 70. I think he's the same age as me.
Wow.
Talk to me in 20 years.
Yeah.
Talk to me in 20 years.
You personally, you'll be very young then.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll be 110. No, 20 years. Yeah, 110.
I got a request. This is one of my favorite stories. Is the day that Mr. Bleecker was actually Mr. Parker. You tell that story, if you would. That story cracked me.
I tell you what, let Tom tell it, because it's when the phone company was, all the girls used to come by from the phone company on their way home.
That's right. You told it to me last September. I can't get that story. That's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard.
It's on your video, on your thing.
Yeah.
At the West LA school, which was a Santa Monica school, up the street on Cotner was the phone company. And they had a lot of, back then they had the information operators where you'd call and you could ask for phone numbers and operators. And they got off at 8 o'clock, the girls in the phone company, and they would walk down Cotner where the bus stop was, and then they would go home, they'd take the bus. Well, our school was right on the corner. So they'd get there early, and we got to know some, we invite them in and all that. Well, you know, by that time, Ed Parker had left, and we were just working out in the school, and so we got to know these girls. And Larry, I think it was Larry Hartzell, told one of the girls who asked, said I was Ed Parker. And I didn't say anything about it because, you know, I mean, the signs up there and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
So I went out with her once, I think, and then she came by the school once to watch me work out, I guess. And Ed Parker was there. And I was out on the mat, and I saw her walk in. I thought, what is she doing here? And then I saw Ed Parker walk over to her in the viewing room and say, hello, can I help you with something? And she said, I heard her say, no, I'm here to see Ed Parker. and he said, well, I'm Ed Parker. And she said, no, you're not. And he looked at her and said, what? And she said, that's him, and pointed at me. And there was no way out. There was a back, there was no way out. And so afterwards, he walked over to me and said, what was all that about with her saying that she left after that when she realized I'd lied to her, or somebody lied. And he came over and said, what was all that about and everything? I said, listen, she's confused. She works up at the phone company, and she comes down here, and somehow I was trying to promote you in the school, and somehow she's got confused. She's works at the phone company, and you know how they are up there, and so I think somehow she thought I was you, and I went, oh God.
That's some fancy footwork you just had.
It was awful.
That's a good one.
Thanks, Larry.
I'll tell you, the one that I got to kick out was there was a kid came in and he says, I belong in the advanced class, but they got me in a beginner's class. And I said, well, look here, let's see how you fit on. Okay. So he gets into the classes moving on, and he's telling the guys next to him how they're mistakenly doing things. They're not doing it right. And I'm not too happy about this to begin with. So then all of a sudden it comes time to freestyle. And now this was a beginner's class. And these guys, so many of them had never freestyled. And it's a little intimidating the first time you face somebody else and you realize he's going to ball up his fist and go for you. So, you know, they're going to be nervous. And I told him, I said, now, and I was talking mainly to this one dude, now take it easy. I mean, now this guy I found out that he had a year with Ed Parker. Then he had a year with Jimmy Woo. Then he was back to finish with what he started with Ed Parker. So he had 2 years, one with Parker, one without. So, but he had 2 years. So he gets in there and he scared the hell out of this poor guy. He had some moves, and I stopped. I stopped it almost immediately. Stopped and had him sit back down and did it again. He did the same thing again, and now he's feeling. I really belong in the advanced class. Yeah. So then I noticed some of the intermediate guys walking across the back of the mats, and I said, oh, this is good. I call one of them out, and I said, let me explain to everybody what's going on. I said, here's a person that's had 2 years with Ed Parker, never chased. Now here's another person that had 1 year with Ed Parker, 1 year with somebody else. I didn't say who. And I said, now we'll have a chance to see what the training has done. Put it together, and I didn't say to this guy what it was all about or anything. Just that. How'd you make? And they started. Well, what he had been doing to the beginners, this intermediate guy was doing to him, and not knowing what was going on or anything, but it was just like, what is this? It's so easy. What's happening? And I could see the frustration building in this kid's face. And finally, we finished, and it was sad. It was sad because he had nothing against somebody who was really trained. So then afterwards, he comes up to me and he says, "I'll kick his ass. What's the matter with him? What's the matter with him?" And I said, who are you talking about? The guy was fighting. Says, "You're gonna do what?" So I'm kicking his ass. I said, "Really? How you plan on doing it? It just handed you yours." You think you? I said, "Forget about it." And of course, we never saw the guy again. And the guy that walked across the mat that night, Tom Bleecker. I asked him. I told him the story, and I said, "Do you remember that?" He said, "Oh, I don't remember." No,
That's awesome.
but I did because I remember who. I remember that time. It's just I knew who it was and who I was calling on, and that was
back then. It's interesting that I was fighting adults. I mean, I was a kid. I mean, I was fighting adults, and many of them were big. Bob Cook, Scott Loring, Jim Corbett. Go down the line.
Yeah, they were all big
I mean,
guys.
these guys were big guys.
Yeah.
And compared to them, I was kind of, so I was used to going up against adults. It was like fighting my dad. And plus they were big. So when I saw that guy, I suppose it was like, well, this is a blessing. I mean,
the BKF, I read a thing one time, one of them was being interviewed, and he said, "We were just children." And he says, "We were beating adults." And he says, "You don't know what that feels like."
Yeah.
He says, "That's great. That's absolutely great." Walking there as a 15-year-old kid, and here's a 25-year-old guy, and you beat the crap out of him. And you sit back down like, yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I was 27 when I started, so I can't imagine that. I was never young when they were.
You're not an adult yet.
And you're right, I'm not an adult yet.
In another 20 years.
Yeah.
Yes. But we'll be adults then.
Yeah. Maybe we're going to pass being teenagers.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, having been a kid in a studio and having gotten beat up by some grown-ups, when you were a kid, and then growing up to end up being the manager of said karate studio, and then able to orchestrate some retribution once I got to about 2021. There was we had a couple guys who some of the kids hadn't even done karate in a couple years, but they showed up for Tuesday night sparring because they heard this guy from our past was coming in for sparring class. So I haven't seen you since I was 13. Oh, sparring class is Tuesday night at 6:30. We would love for you to show us something. Yeah.
Ed Parker had a guy show up one night, and he says, "My son studies with you," and he said, "I'd like to sign up also." And I said, "We're good, And the guy told him, he says, "The reason I'm here was because my son, is doing this." And I said, "Well, I want to see what you've learned. So let's put on the gloves." And the kid says, "Well, we don't use gloves. We'll put them on anyway." Okay. He says, "I couldn't touch him. I just couldn't touch him." He said, "I better get some of this myself." So the father actually followed the son into the yard. I like that.
Yeah.
He said, when his son started to scare him. Now my son, my poor son, he said, "I'll never be able to beat my old man." He said, "I don't care if he's 105 and in a wheelchair, he'll get me anyhow." Because he was never interested in the art. I never forced him to do it. He never forced me to play the guitar, so I never forced him to do karate.
So back in those earlier days, what was a class typically like? Was it mostly fighting, or a lot of like basics or self-defense techniques? How did it kind of go?
All right, well, you got it. All right, the early days. You talk about the early
days.
All right,
Yeah.
When I was a white belt. Mm-hmm. All right, as a white belt, you did basics. I mean, most of the class was basics.
Just hold
I was just punching, kicking, punching, blocking, and so on, and then fighting, and then techniques. And he was teaching a technique, and then you work it for a few weeks, and he introduce another one, and we just kept getting a few more. But there was only so many anyhow, and we'd go over and review them and so on. But basics, and everything was low. I mean, we were down just like you were messing around on the floor. Yeah. I mean, really getting your asses about that far off the floor. And I mean, you were down there, and that's just how it was.
And it was a mix.
Everybody was low.
Was it mixed, like advanced and beginners all together, or did he split that
No,
up?
it was basically only a beginner's class and an advanced class, a more advanced beginner's class, really, because we're all beginners, And then finally, you had enough to split off into a more advanced class, and then eventually you had an advanced, which was small, which was Rich Park Army. There's a picture in there. This was more or less the advanced class. And then intermediate class, which is bigger, and then your biggest one was the beginner's class. And when they get big enough and good enough, they move into the intermediate class, and get good enough, they move up to the advanced class.
And that was all done by tips, right? 1 tip,
Yep.
2 tip, 3 tip.
Yep. That was before the colored belt, and that's a whole. I wanted the colored belts to be there mainly because Chuck Norris's guys had such an advantage over us because they made brown belt. It took them about 3 years. It was taking us about 2, and I can't say that because it took me 3, 3 years and 2 months or whatever. But it was taking us a lot longer. It was taking them a lot longer. He had to turn around. So we finally had it to work. We're making brown in about 2 years, and then black in about 2 more. Well, Norris, the guys, it took them 3 years to make brown. So they were fighting as white belts while we're fighting as browns. And they were beating the hell out of the white belts because they had another year on them. And they were beating the hell out of the browns because they had another year on them. And by black belt, everything kind of just evened out. Mm-hmm. And I know he didn't do it intentionally. It's just the way it was done in Korea. That's just how he came up. And it gave him a big advantage. I kept telling Ed, the guy's got a big advantage on us. A big advantage. I mean, he's winning everything, for God's sakes. And it is right. He's throwing a year in advancement of where he should be on our guys. And Dave Emmer was telling the same thing, a few other people. And he just would not budge off that tips thing. And they were terrible. I mean, the tips were like a half-inch wide with a half-inch in between them, maybe. I mean, maybe it would be a brown large lot pen. Mm-hmm. Maybe it would be a tape. Maybe it was some kind of material, dyed, undyed, whatever. I mean, the tips you had to kind of go over and take a guy's belt and count them. I told you that color. That when they change colors, you could feel it. It's an advancement. And you see it. It's evident really from an orange to a purple to a blue, blue to green, green to brown, brown to black. I said it makes sense. The Korean's got a good idea. It's Korean. He didn't like it just because it was Korean. Mm-hmm. And then somebody came along and said, "But had you considered everybody that gets promoted has to buy a new belt?" And he heard the register go ching.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, it makes sense. And all of a sudden we had the color belts.
So I have a question about this because it's not like you said like Jimmy Flanagan's Karate House down the street. You just casually threw Chuck Norris out there, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, old Chuck Norris. Yeah, we know Chuck Norris. So Chuck Norris was the guy that you were like, was he your competition down the road at the time? Was he the guy that, oh man, I hate fighting Chuck Norris's guys at tournaments? Is that the way you guys are talking? That's the way it sounds to me.
No. We were friendly. We were friendly competitors.
I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean it in like you. That's the guy that you were. Some of my closest friends are guys that I would look across the ring at in tournaments when we were younger, type of a deal. That was Chuck Norris for you guys and his students.
No, because he was in the valley. I mean, he was not.
No, he was also in the South Bay.
Where?
Not on Artesia.
Oh, yeah, but that was later, wasn't it?
Well, it was.
Dick Treschel's on Artesia. Norris had a school, and the Gable House old parking lot at Sepulveda and Hawthorne Boulevard and then he had one in downtown Torrance on like Cravens.
It is pretty close to us, so we
Okay.
were more like friendly competitors. If you were closer, you went there. If you were close to us, you went to us. Or if you knew somebody, you went there. And if you knew somebody, you went to us or whatever. But we were always friendly, very friendly. I was always friendly with Norris. Always. I admired him I admired him for what he did. He was a true professional. Couldn't act worth a damn, but that's
couldn't what?
Couldn't act worth a damn, but that's another story.
I loved him.
Yeah, she loved
I
it.
bought a ramp truck just looking.
No, I thought he had.
I did.
I thought he had great reactions, and but as an actor, I wouldn't hire him.
I
He's
watched
one of
the
the
show
nicest
every
guys
week.
you'd ever meet.
Really?
Yes,
Really, I mean,
yes.
a true gentleman. By the way, we also, in the early years, we did the forms. We learned forms also in those classes.
Yes.
Because usually after we did the basics and all that, we either did a technique or a form. It all kind of alternated. But the forms, he stressed them. He liked the forms. He was a great form man. If you've ever seen footage of him doing forms, he is the gold standard in the Kenpo forms.
How many
In my opinion.
How many forms were there back then?
Lots.
How many forms were back then? Because now there's so many.
1, 2, 3, the black belt set,
And the poke set. We called them poke set.
poke set,
Poke
yeah,
set,
poke
figure
set,
set,
figure
and
set,
four.
figure set.
Four.
Yeah, 4. That's it.
Was it?
Now then there became short 1, long 1, short 2, long 2, short 3, long 3, and then 4, 5, and 16.
I was the one who originated short 4. You know that.
Oh yeah,
No, that's true.
really?
Yeah, and I'll tell you the story. It's
Alright.
a great story. When I had my school in Solvang, the last IKK affiliated school in Solvang in 1987, I entered my students at the Long Beach International. We were going to go, it was, what was the movie with Clark Gable, the Bongo Straits? We're going back to the Bongo Straits. Run Silent, Run Deep.
Oh, yeah.
The great movie. So we're going back there. So I work on 4, because 4, that's the one. I go back in there, they call my name, I'm lined up, all the other black belts are there, I'm doing well, I go up there, I tell them who I am, I tell them I'm going to do long 4 with their permission, and so on and so forth, and they said, go ahead, I take my steps back, I start, I open, and I start. And I get about 20 moves in, 25 moves in, and I freeze. I just freeze. I said, where am I? What happened? I knew I had a bad ankle, and I knew later on I was going to have to jump and do that thing with a jump, but I froze. So I closed out. I just closed out, and when I stood by the thing, Lex Sensenbrenner was the guy that looked at me. He was the judge at the time. He said, Mr. Bleeker, would you like it? I said, no. You can't get a redo in the international. Oh, excuse me, my foot hurt? No. So about an hour later, I'm up on the next level, and I'm walking down, and I see Ed Parker coming towards me with a bunch of people. I didn't think anything of it, and he gets here, he sort of veers off towards me, and he leans into me and says, hey, Tom, I heard you did short 4. Somebody told him. He saw it, I don't know. But that was the first time he made a reference to short form 4, and he said he credited me.
That's a good story.
True
That's
story.
awesome.
It's a true story.
That's funny.
So when did Form 5 kick in?
Oh God! He started introducing forms. People would ask me if you want the latest form. I said I'm still working on Form 3. I'm still trying to get that for God's sakes. No, I don't. I'm not interested in learning new stuff. Please, I got enough of it.
Was 4 the gold standard for in terms of black belt? Like black belt, you got to come to the table with 4.
Yeah.
4 was the big form,
I think Frank Trano said that also. Didn't he?
Yeah.
I think Frank won that year when you won everything. He did 4.
He did 4, and I remember with Roger Meadows for the Friday Night Line we'd run it, and Roger was he was pretty far back also, and he would do the techniques, and he didn't know the names of the techniques, so he used to call Sleepy Bye Bye and for the sleeper, and patty cakes for circling, all this. So they made up names for everything, but he didn't know the official names, and he said it's all in Form 4. That was the
Patty cakes.
big
That's awesome.
part of the Kenpo world. Yeah, patty cakes and sleepy nights.
For a long time, Ed Parker didn't know the names either, because those names came up with Huck Planis and who was the other one that worked with him?
Tom Kelly.
Was it Tom Kelly?
didn't
And
know.
Ed Parker was really busy. I mean, he had a lot. He was busy, so he didn't have time to learn all those names. It took some time to learn all those names. And I remember people used to come up to him and ask him about, what do you think about, and he'd name the name. And Parker would say, well, show me what you And he'd show him, and then he'd explain. He'd answer them and everything else. But you had to, oftentimes you had to show him the technique, because if you told him the name, a lot of them he didn't know. I still don't know the names of some of those. You don't know. I don't know. Maybe you.
I know R55. That's all.
Yeah.
We didn't used to have names for ours even though.
No, we didn't.
Were numbers? Were they numbers?
No, there
Or they
was,
just-
remember this one for that, and that one for this. And
this for that?
It was second technique in brother.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got that one.
The guy comes up and grabs you and chokes you.
Yeah, yeah. We sat out in the garage here one rainy afternoon, and a whole bunch of us guys from Napa, people came down, people came from all over, and we voted on the names. I had everybody put in a list of the names they wanted, and we voted on the names because we had a list for each technique, had a bunch of them. And Vic and I had driven up to Napa. That's a long drive, and driven back again.
7 hours.
Yeah, and it was on our way up Spring Street, going to Vic's house, and we named the last technique. I mean, it took us that long, and I think we got something like 4 out of all the voting and everything, but because we voted on all the names, and the majority got it, and that's how we named them. I didn't want to be responsible for it.
We did have names in the early years.
Well, they had nicknames, the 5 count, which became 5
Backbreaker,
swords,
the Dance of
backbreaker,
Death.
Believe It Dead.
But only a few.
So did the names, a lot of, did the majority of them come from Tom Kelly and Huck? Or, like, where?
So?
Yeah.
I
I had
didn't want to
nothing to
name
do
one
with it.
originally, and Vic kept saying, "You got to name them. We got to name them." And I kept saying, "But it's a Parker thing." I felt like I was almost plagiarizing, by doing that. And then I said, all of a sudden, I remembered a book that he had given me. It was all in Chinese, but at the bottom, somebody had translated, and it was like waiter with entree, woman looking in mirror, and things of that sort. And I thought, that's where I got the idea. Thank you, Ed. And we named our techniques. And that was a great idea. You got to name the techniques. You got to.
Does anybody know how many actual Ed Parker techniques there were in that system?
154.
That's
No, I'm sorry, the forms.
Like,
One night we were here and we were working out, and Eddie Booz was in the driveway doing a form, and some of us stopped and we started looking at him, and we said, "What the hell's he doing?" So when he finished, he came over and I said, "What form were you doing?" And he said, "I was doing short 8."
oh.
And
That's a secret form you buried in that.
we looked. Well, I looked at Chuck, and Chuck looked at me and went, "Got me beat too."
Yeah.
So
Short 8.
short 8. And I
Well, there
never.
is a Form 8.
Well,
Right.
Yeah.
is there
Yeah.
a short 8 though?
If you do left first and then right side, then
Yeah.
left side, then right side.
Yeah.
Follow the same
Was
format.
it
yes.
6 that he
No,
said?
he said 8.
Oh, okay.
Who did you teach short form 3 backwards to? You taught it on the left side.
Oh, I don't know.
We
but I
always do
remember
that now.
doing
He
it.
taught him on the left side, and when the guy found out, he was all pissed off and down. I said, "What do you mean? Well, you know the form, just change it over."
Just flip it.
Yeah, just flip it. And he's like, "John Walker."
Yeah. Okay.
It's Big John. Yeah.
I don't want to teach him the wrong form.
I gotta tell the story. Big John was, we met him when he had just come out of San Quentin after 9 years. And when you're in San Quentin for 9 years, you meet some
He's a
bad people.
good guy.
Yeah. So anyhow, John comes out, but John wasn't a criminal. He wasn't of a criminal mind, really. It was his upbringing. He was brought up by a con man, literally a guy that stole him from his parents, and they didn't realize what was happening, and so John had a very very unusual upbringing, and Big John would wait, where was I going with this? But Big John.
Oh, teaching him the form backwards.
Oh,
Or
no,
up-
just
the
teaching.
opposite side.
No, well, and wait a minute, no, it wasn't that.
Just got out of prison.
He just
When-
got out of
when-
prison.
when you
So he's
first
a,
met
so
Quentin?
he's a big guy. I mean, he didn't get the name Big John because he's tiny. So all of a sudden, he's a beginner. And all of a sudden, his hand goes up in the class. And I said, "Yes, John, what?" And I was teaching the inward block. And he says, "Does this really work?" And I said, "Well, of course it does." Because all of a sudden, I thought to myself, "Oh my God, he's this mountain of a guy is looking at me, and he's thinking, this is such crap. I'll just one time he's across on Santa Boulevard. So I thought, I said, yeah, John, it really does. But I tell you, now you got to throw on me. He said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, John, now you got me thinking, and I can't afford to think. I got to trust what I'm teaching, because how can I teach them how to trust? So I've got to. So I said, now I'm going to set the block. I said, I want you to throw in as hard as you can. If you hit me, I've been hit before. Don't worry about it. I'll get over it, but you won't hit me. So I said, now go ahead and throw into it. I said, now if you don't throw hard enough, you're not going to be satisfied, and I'm not going to be satisfied. So go ahead, go for it. And he did. He wound up, and I think I moved my whole body, but the block held. There's nothing, there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, John threw hard. So fast forward 4 years, he made black belt, and we're out to a tournament or demonstrating something, and John says, John couldn't drink at all. If he had a beer, he smashed. And for some odd reason, I guess their cook machine was busted. He had a beer that day. And we're all, eating pizza amicably there. And he says, you really pissed me off one time. And I'm like, where the hell did this come from? What are you talking about, John? And he'd been to my house. We'd been to parties together. We'd done a lot. And he says, you remember that time on Lusciano Boulevard? And I said, oh, yeah, I remember that. He says, you killed my arm. I said, what do you mean? He says, I didn't get the feeling back in my last 2 fingers for 10 days. He says, I said, I had a nerve. He said, I know. And he says, I thought to myself, quote, that little prick didn't have to hit me that hard. And I said, John, I didn't hit you at all. I said, it's like going out and hitting the lamppost. It's the lamppost the lamppost don't give a damn, but your arm is going to fit.
Right.
He says, I know that now, Chuck, but I didn't know that then.
Uh-huh.
And but it all worked out in the end. He did become a black belt. He was very good. He busted Takamoto's nose. Ooh. And one day he asked him to freestyle, and Takamoto gets said, and John goes, poop, and she says, hey, broke my nose. John says, he called everybody kiddo. Even Ed Parker, hey kiddo.
Yeah.
He says, well, I thought you were going to block,
Johnny had a move that I've never seen anybody else use, but it was very effective. You remember that. He used to take his front hand, and he used to race at you, and he was a tall man, so his reach was good. And he used to, with his front hand, he used to knock down your lead hand and continue on to your face.
So one move.
Yeah, one move, he would knock it down and keep going with it, and it was very effective.
That's how you got them Cobra's nose.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
But he was shocked that he got Takamoto's nose.
So this was just in a class environment, or it was a fighting environment when he broke his. I mean, because that's Takamoto once again. These are not like simple names.
Right. I think we're doing some filming or another, and he asked him, "Would you freestyle?" And he said, "Sure, he'll freestyle." And never moved. Didn't boom. Just caught one. What time's it getting to be?
7:53.
Oh, okay.
You can go on.
Oh, we can go on with this all night if we want to, but
Nobody
Any real
can
good,
stop you.
Sibora, anybody asking any questions of Chuck that we're on the bottom asking?
I didn't see anything yet.
Any good
Let's
questions
see.
for Chuck?
any questions for anybody?
anybody.
Let's see. No,
Besides
they're all telling us how to fix the camera. No, just turn it.
That's
Yeah, no, there's no questions in here.
Technology.
Yeah, if you got any questions, ask him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Good.
Okay, so you see a lot of times in the older videos of Mr. Parker, there was posing and all of this stuff. And was there any significance behind that? Was that like a blocking? Because you don't see it in modern Kenpo practitioners. You see it more on the older practitioners. A few, but very few. So like, was there any significance behind that? Was that a block, or was there anything? Again, the significance behind it.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. I never learned any moves off of those moves. So
You know what I mean? Like when he was covering out, he, you know, double
covering
pie
out. I mean, talking about covering out. Vic was the master of covering out.
Yeah.
He did. My God. I said, Vic, you pull out on the street, they're gonna write you up. I said, don't do that on the street. Yeah. Oh God, cover
Yeah,
out.
Vic did a good job in those 2 movies like that.
Someone did put a request in here. A gentleman, Dennis Belavia, said, Chuck, tell them about the lack of control at First Internationals.
Oh, the first international was bloodbath. It was. I mean, there was no control. Here was like you got adult males who already knew how to fight. Now they've learned how to fight better. But in many cases, now I had 3 guys walk up to me after the first internationals and say, "We want to thank you." I said, "You're welcome." For what? What do you thank me for? He says, "For teaching us to block." None of us got hurt. None of my guys got hurt. All the competitors. They lost or they won or they stayed less than several matches or whatever, but nobody got injured. I was standing next to Ed Parker at the first internationals, and we're discussing something, and here comes a guy in a civilian suit walking among the rings. He walks up and he says, "Mr. Parker, you got to do something about the control here, sir. I just counted 8 knockouts walking across the floor." And I mean, we're talking about a barewood floor, hardwood floor, and these guys, bare knuckles. I thought they outlawed that. Bare knuckle fighting. Yeah. I mean, really, you know. And them guys, we had no pads. We had shin pads and cups. And the shin pads were about that thick, and they're the little white ones. Remember them?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, the bike, whatever.
Yeah, bike.
And they were crap. And that's, I mean, in fact, I know a lot of people didn't even wear cuffs in the beginning. Oh, I don't have to get it. Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Where you come?
But they did wear shin pads, because anybody who's clashed roundhouse kicks knows the value.
How about the second time on the same injury?
Yeah, you wear shin pads forever after that.
That's like hitting what's the guard at the back of the truck when you're going through the market and you hit that?
The trailer hitch?
That's it.
We were talking about that earlier today. I was telling him yesterday, you hit a trailer hitch, you will never forget that.
You've learned a new language.
I am with you there. I worked in a feed store. I know what you're talking about. But anyway, yeah, that's...
Yeah, no, the first international was just that. It was a bloodbath. Yeah, now you got guys that are even more sophisticated methodology of fighting, and it was brutal. It was just plain brutal. And they weren't disqualifying hardly anybody for anything. So
Why?
I mean, well, it needed to develop. The judges didn't know what they were doing.
If people are bleeding,
You'd think.
I'm just.
Well, that you had the inadequacy of the judging. There were judges from all over. Oh, and each of them had their own ideas about what was a point. Some would score hands
right.
only, some would score feet only, some would score either one.
The Japanese judges would not score a back fist at all. You could put a guy's nose in his ear and it's no power. Really? No power. I mean, you like that.
But what happened is, and I think this is what probably he was asking you, is that you had a meeting about it.
Oh,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so go
They
ahead.
had meetings about it every international, and you accomplished the same thing. I mean, it got better over time, but it took a long time, really.
But at the 64 Internationals, if my memory serves me, you had a meeting and you decided that the first hit, you'd get a warning. And then the second hit, you were out. And so everybody figured that one out real quickly. I get a freebie.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, you get a free hit, and then you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, bro. I'm so sorry." But now the guy's like this, there was a group, and they said, "Okay, what we're going to do is the first one, you get a warning." We're like, "Okay."
Well, I think
Thank you.
When it was a 3-minute time limit, I think that was Joe Lewis's strategy. He'd go blast you with the first one, maybe or maybe not get a point, but then he'd just dance around, get another point, and walk off the match.
We do have actually a few questions on here. Number one, I'll start bottom up.
All right.
How many Kenpo guys does it take to hold a camera upright? I won't call out. Well, it's on
Hey,
there.
whoever that was, F you.
Got jokes.
Yeah. And then, all right, we'll go to the next one is for Miss Cheryl Pyers.
Cheryl.
Mr. Sullivan, Who is your biggest competition in your opinion, and what was your most satisfying victory? This is
Wow.
Crazy question.
I don't know. I mean, maybe Cheryl.
Yeah.
Competition in what?
International.
Who is your big? Well, maybe we might need Cheryl to clarify.
Yeah.
Who is your biggest competition in your opinion? So I don't know if that's about the art. Or
Your
back in the fighting.
competitor, maybe.
Probably Gitch and Funakoshi.
You know,
Me and Gitch, we fought 3 times.
I didn't even know most of the competitors. I mean, they were faces in the crowd. That's the nice thing about freestyling strangers. I mean, you're across from a stranger, and you don't now. If you're both playing, Tom brought it up. If you're both playing by the same rules, you have a nice match. But if one guy is street fighting and the other is freestyling, then someone's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's when tempers flare. Because that happened to me in San Francisco. A guy clocked me over the eye, and no apology, no nothing. It's okay. So I caved his ribs there. I won the match, and he got busted ribs and come up to me afterwards and said, "Nice match." I said, "It was a shit match. You got pissed off. I got pissed off. It was terrible."
Wow.
So no, that was the only time I really got angry, because I mean, of a total lack of control. Total. I mean, the guy was going for it, but I didn't know that at first. So you pays your money and takes your chances. And what was my most satisfying? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, she clarified her question was about in competition.
Yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
know if that's the Chuck Norris background that you guys were just describing in terms of. No.
No, it's just the competition was competition,
Yeah.
and it was all what it was. I recommend it because of, if you do it enough, and you get into it on the street, it's just another match. Well, now you get to go for it. Now you get to really bang them instead of controlling. And if you have the finite control that requires real good freestyle, then you got to control the hit too. That's easy. Because coming this close is difficult when you really move in. But when you can just blast, oh wow, that's got to be satisfying as hell. I don't know. I've never had it. No, I never have. I have never. In all the years, that's because when I was 14, I almost killed a guy. And it was a playground thing. It was stupid, and I was so scared. I could see the blurring headlines now. Used to kill his friend in a fit of rage. I mean, that's sticking with you forever. You just murdered somebody. No, that scared the hell out of me. It really did.
You're the same league with Chuck Norris. He's never had a street fight.
No, I believe no. Why would he?
Ask Bailey that
You know, he's had.
Very.
You know, I think that our real competition back then was the Shotokan people. There was a group of Shotokan people, and that's why Ed Parker, if you look at how he put his system together, it was against the Shotokan stylist. Because if you look at early pictures of Ed Parker, he was Shotokan, very Shotokan, learned from Matoshi and Chow. But he knew to become successful, he'd have to show against a Shotokan stylist. But we never fought them because they never went in the international. They had Nisei Week, they had Nishiyama, and Oshima.
Oshima?
And Oyama was somewhere, but Oshima, but the big one was Nishiyama.
Yeah.
But we never did anything with them, and it was night and day between Shotokan, those hard stylists. I often wondered how we might have done against them because they were good.
So was that the genesis of a lot of the attacks, like this very strong step through right punch?
Absolutely, because when you went to do a demonstration, that's what we demoed against. You stepped through with a lockout, and you went in, you did whatever. Yeah. It was against that Shotokan model because they were the standard at that time. Everything was Japanese.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you think that you didn't go with them because the Shotokan, they had like the 2-step and the 4-step, so it wasn't really a freestyle, and maybe that's why you guys didn't flow together?
They didn't allow their students to enter in any tournaments but their own. So I don't know. I know they were very good. I had a friend of mine, Lee Mall, who was a big agent in Hollywood later in life. I went to high school with him, and he was studying with Oshima, and I was studying with Ed Parker. And I got together with Lee a couple times, and he could move. And I'll tell you, if a Shotokan guy hits you, you're in trouble because they put all that focus on one blow. It's all there, and if you get hit with that thing, you're hurt. Yeah, they'll hurt you.
When we were coming up the ranks, we came up in this same school, and they taught a form before you learned short one, and it was Heian Shodan. Mm-hmm. So that was the first thing and I think that, I don't even know if that was his logic behind it, but it's to develop that, that power, that strength, that stability.
We did Heian Shodan because the transitions were easier than that outward block in short form 1.
Yeah.
So it was easier for white. That's just why we did it, But we got that.
And then you went on to short one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was another. No. Okay. Well, Mr. Bleeker. There was a question about the relationship between Mr. Parker and Nick Serio, and what that all involved in his offshoot and what that relationship was like.
I really know very little about that.
Okay.
I just don't have any information. Chuck may know. I don't know.
Okay.
I know they were close. That's all I know.
Okay.
And
Fair
I
enough.
know that he respected Nick and all, but I don't think I even met Nick. Tell you the truth.
Serio.
Yeah.
How about you may know, Chuck? What do you know about Nick Serio?
Nothing.
All right. All right. Next question, people.
Did he exist?
Yeah.
He was my first Kenpo instructor.
Okay.
Nick.
East Coast.
Oh, really?
East Coast.
Back in
I think you did tell me that. Yeah.
1977, 78. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, never met him.
Yeah, he was a smaller guy. He had hands that were the size of baseball mitts, and he hit like a freight train when he got you.
Yeah, he was good.
He was.
Ed Parker liked him. They were good friends.
They were. As he always spoke of Mr. Parker like very, very highly. It was like very, very close relationship. Nick's Mr. Serio system was really more Okinawan based. It was very linear. It had a lot of pinyons in it. It had very linear movement, and Mr. Parker seemed to have more of a flowing movement to it. But they're very close, believe it or not, in the techniques. When you get into the techniques, you'll see a lot of similarities in especially the upper rank techniques.
That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever learn the book set?
No.
That was one form that was sort of
The book set.
sort of hanging around in the periphery when I came in, but it wasn't part of ours, but some of the older guys knew it.
All the guys from Ireland in the last internationals we had that we did over Zoom, the Irish guys
They know
pumped out books.
So they got it
gorgeous.
from McSweeney.
And they still do it. A lot of their guys still do it. Yeah.
They got that from McSweeney, who got it from probably Wu, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, we coming from Philadelphia. It was a strong Tracy influence. It was the Tracys that started it, and book set was one of those forms.
Tracy had it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Tiger,
Oh, okay.
Tiger, and book set were two things that.
Okay.
But here's the deal. For me, I missed it because Ed Parker was coming in and converting. So my instructors were going, "Don't worry about book set. We learned this new thing called long 3," and that. So I missed out on that. But that was absolutely. If you went to tournaments in Philly in the '80s, you would see that.
Yeah.
Kinda, and then the open up stance and yeah.
Even
One
in the
thing,
90s.
Chuck, that you would recall and may want to talk about is in the early years we had to sign a non-disclosure kind of agreement that we wouldn't teach anybody except our immediate family. And if Ed Parker heard that you were in another school, you were out.
Yeah. You couldn't even go watch what they were doing. That was verboten, except for Danny Asano. Danny would go and come back and tell what it was like and so on, and Ed just
Early mafia.
didn't pay any attention to that, to Danny.
Yep.
Well, it was a split with Jimmy Wood. Really, Ed was really hurt by it, and he just
Oh
didn't
my
want to
God,
go
he was
through that
devastated.
again.
Devastated.
Knowing him as well as you guys knew him, if he were here today looking down on the martial art Kenpo community, whatever shoots and branches, what do you think he would say, think, feel about where we are today as a Kenpo society?
Good question.
That would really be difficult to say.
Yeah, it's all speculation,
Yeah.
sure.
I think you would say, I'm right here, I'm doing what you're doing, what you said.
Well,
And I've changed it.
we're not doing what he did basically.
No, you would tell him that you changed what you
Yeah,
told him you were going to do.
we changed what he did because we put brevity back into it, and we took the repetition out of it, and we made things much more realistic. I think
more
that
fluid.
well, much more fluid. I think that much of what he did was the result of that split that Tom talked about. It got back to him through the grapevine that Jimmy wooed the guys away, not to, but he did that, and part of his sales pitch, it was a con, really. I mean, he saw what Ed Parker had, a man who had everything. Plus, he had education. He had a lot of things that Jimmy Woo didn't have. But Jimmy said, "Well, I can have it too, and I'll just take what he's got." And Ed was still building his dynasty at the time, and that was he was doing what he had to do for his family. I mean, he was busy, and he was turning it over more and more to Jimmy Woo, and Jimmy Woo was gathering the guys in, and he got it all. I didn't care for the man. I didn't care for what he was doing. I didn't care for his style. I just I stole a couple of things from it, but I mean, as a style, I just didn't care for it that much. So I just integrated it into what we have and let it go at that. But as far as part of what he mentioned was that Ed Parker has taught you everything he knows. So come with me and I'll teach you the real stuff. Well, he didn't have the real stuff for one thing. Now, when I met Bruce Lee, we asked Bruce. He had just come from Hong Kong. And we said, as soon as we heard Hong Kong, it's just come from Hong Kong. Oh my God, So what are the martial arts like in Hong Kong? He says, well, it's mostly commercial bullshit. 95%. He said commercial, and we were like, really? Not Hong Kong, really? Because there's a Chinese fella coming from China and telling us, so you had to believe him. I did, and then he said. I was watching what you were doing earlier. Oh, he asked about the other 5%. And he said, half of them are trying, but they don't know what they're doing. So then the 5%, the 2.5% that was left, he says, no, those guys are the real deal. But you wouldn't get down the alley where they work out before you round eyes and you killed them. So does the word tong or triad ring a bell? So that was those guys. But Bruce was after something else. Bruce was after something that was really going to work in our society. And I think he found it. I really do.
You said the movies. You said it was the movies.
Oh, well, he really wanted to be in the movies. That was his whole thrust in life, yeah. It was James Colburn who said, Bruce Lee doesn't want to be the best martial artist in the world. He wants to be emperor. Yeah. No, but he made a profound difference in my life because of the next thing he said to us, he said, by the way, I was watching what you were doing earlier, and he was watching Ed Parker teach a class, and he said, why were you doing this? And he showed us a move that we were doing, and we're like, because I was teaching it? Yeah. Why were we, what kind of question is that? And he said, well, I just wondered because they were wrong. Now, you don't walk in, nobody here would walk into somebody else's dojo and tell their students what the guy's teaching is wrong. Even if it was, even if you knew it, you just wouldn't bring it up. Well, Bruce did.
Well, he had the fortitude to do it.
Well, he had the fortitude and the chutzpah,
the balls or
whatever else. And that was his personality. He would do that. And I was on my way home that night, and I was thinking to myself, I was 9 years his senior. Now, between 21 and 30, that's a lot of life experience. I was in business for myself. I'd gone to school. I've been in the Marine Corps. I met some killers. I mean, you learn a lot in 9 years as an adult, a young adult. But I'm wondering, how come I can't do that? How come he could walk in here for 30 minutes and watch something and tell us and critique it and be right? Because he was right.
Because he had the fortitude.
Well, he did. But then I said to myself, how do you know you can't do it? You never tried. I never questioned anything Ed Parker taught us. Nothing, ever. It could be as wrong could be, and I never questioned it, and I never would until that night, and then I questioned everything, and that was really why we did what we did, because I questioned everything.
And that changed your life.
Yes, it did. Bruce changed my life that night. Yeah. He really did. From doing nothing to questioning nothing to questioning everything. And now if you don't care about something, so what? Let it slide. I won't mention something, even if I don't. I don't care. But if I do, this is something I do care about, and I do care about what we do. I really, really do. And if it's right, it's right, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. And I'll be the first to admit it now too.
But you've also said that, which I think is quite a statement, that Ed Parker could make every one of those techniques work.
Yep.
On the first move.
Yep. The man could. He could do things that we couldn't do. And that's another thing that I question. What sense is it for me to learn something that you can do that I can't? Why not make it so that I can do it too? You know, and that's what I have to do. And that's what my ladies have to do. And if you got any women students or kids or whatever, I mean, you've got to modify it to them. Just because Ed Parker could do it, what does that mean?
Well, Bruce had the same thing.
Of course.
You know, everybody tried to do what Bruce, you can't.
Yeah, well,
Unless you're
Bruce would tell you right out, don't try to do what I do because you can't do it.
Yeah.
And he knew that.
Ed Parker said that Bruce was 1 in 2 billion.
Yeah, well,
So
yeah.
good luck trying to do what he did.
How do you get the ladies to be able to do that?
Making them think. They've already thought their way through this. They know what they can do and what they can't do. And they can do what they can do very well. And what they can't do, they don't even try.
They're very good.
Yep.
You know, there's a story, I don't know if it's true, but there's a story that Michelangelo was once asked how he made the statue of David. He said, how did you, with a piece of marble, how the heck did you make the statue of David? He said, it was pretty simple. I just chipped away what wasn't David, and that's what I ended up. Yeah, and I guess that's what Ed Parker refers to by when we finally reach the end of the curriculum, we go through tailoring. If it doesn't work for you, you don't use it. But you tailor it down to what works specifically for you. And that's what Bruce Lee did with his JKD. He went out and looked at all of these different systems, and then he chipped away of what worked for Bruce. But these guys that go out now and say, oh, I'm going to learn JKD. To do that, you got to go and learn everything Bruce learned of all those systems, then chip it down for yourself, and you'll have your JKD. But Bruce's JKD isn't going to work for you. They're finding that out. I mean, that's why we have...
That's part of the journey, right?
Steve Walton said one time, had a JKD guy, he said, you've had these moves longer than Bruce Lee, so where are the champions? That's a good question. Where are the JKD champions? They've had those a lot longer than Bruce has had them. You know?
All right, now on another. It's getting late, and we're gonna wind this thing up so we can finally crack a beer. Oh, we got apple pie. That's right. This symbol right here, the Ancient Warriors. Stacy Percassion came to me one day and he says, "I would like to, what would be the word?
Honor the
guy. Yeah, honor the first 15 guys, the only 15 guys that came out of the Parker Sullivan School on Crenshaw Boulevard and then later in Englewood." And I said, that's a wonderful idea. He created the patch, he created the artwork, the whole thing, the lorry down the middle, and I said, but you know what? It should be for all of us in the Parker system, anybody with Parker lineage. So if you learn from a guy who learned from a guy who learned from a guy who learned from Parker, that's Parker lineage, and all of us at this table are of that Parker lineage. So. I would like to present you guys.
Oh, wow.
Chuck is giving you gifts.
Oh, wow.
It's here.
Wearing a helmet.
There.
Oh,
Who is that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mr. Chan. Angelo.
Thank you, sir.
Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dan Diofre.
Oh, wow.
Can we open it?
Sure.
Well, no, that's
Yeah.
going to blow up.
And Sibora.
Sir, thank
Now
you.
there are. It's all contained in there. And what it is. You're now honorary member. Not honorary. There's no such thing as honorary.
No.
You're comped. But that was my gift to you for being here. Thank you for being here, by the way.
It's an honor. Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us. Really.
Whoa.
There's the patch.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Wow.
I will frame this and proudly put this up in my studio for
Absolutely.
everyone
Yeah.
to see.
Well,
This
wear a
is-
patch.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna wear the patch,
Really? And
definitely.
then
Took him all day yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Well, the society, when we all started, we were all young bucks. I mean, you were much younger than I was when I started, but nonetheless, we were all big kids
Yeah.
and little kids in many cases. And there were no seniors. I mean, Ed Parker was 27 years old when I started. He wasn't a senior by any stretch of the imagination. So the only person senior to him really would have been Old Man Chow. So, you know, we've been in the art long enough now so that there are seniors. We have become seniors in the community, in the martial arts community.
No,
Yeah.
And you've got to be a senior in order to be in
we're
this.
teenagers.
You know, we're teenagers, but you've got to be a senior in order to be in the.
We're
there's
over the edge
yeah.
and again, right?
yeah, and there's just a few criteria. You got to be over 40 years old. You have to be a Parker of lineage.
When was
And
that?
you've got to be, and you don't want to be 40, and
That
you've
was
got to have at
40
least 15
some
years
years
in
ago.
the first degree black belt. Now, if we don't know you, I know everybody at the table, so I know that you all qualify.
Yeah.
But if we don't know you and we question it, we might have to have some, you know, proof of age, proof of when you got your diploma
Hey,
and from who.
you gotta pop your license.
Yeah.
You're going back to
Everyone
your
produce some
country.
ID, please.
Right,
I have
please.
an
This is beautiful.
IKK diploma signed by Ed Parker that is inaccurate. It is off by 2 years, but it's still over 30 years old.
All right.
By two. My first degree is signed by Ed Parker.
Yeah, but it's
not a
not.
stamp.
Mine as well. And that was July 16, 1985.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
37 years ago.
Yep.
This is
Yeah,
30
but
years for me
that
this
seems
year
like
that I got the
ages.
black belt.
Yeah, I
It
will.
does.
30 years.
I will proudly wear this on my
50 this
uniform.
month.
Did you?
I will proudly wear this
That
on
was
my
19.
uniform.
Sir, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
This will be
Thank
one
you
of those-
very much.
This
This
will
is
be
an
one of
honor.
those
Such
moves
an honor.
uniform to uniform.
Yeah.
Chuck made some apples. We made some
know,
apples tonight.
We're not done yet. We're not
Good
done.
that I did.
No.
One of the things I put together that for is I've only been in two professions. This is one, and police work is another one, where you make lifelong friends.
I thought it was
Yes.
called.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And lifelong friends. And I don't see anybody else doing that in other areas of their lives. And I started with Chuck over 55 years ago. And Chuck and some other guys like Carl and Chuck Boyd, we've been together for friends and close friends for 55 years. And even though we're not close together physically, but we're close together in spirit. And it's amazing. And that's what really this whole thing is about. All you guys are the same way. We're all in the same boat.
The same boat.
Sir.
And one
Yeah.
thing too that I want to, what you're talking about is all of us here together would not be together if it wasn't for Frank Trejo.
Yeah.
And when Frank Trejo was sick and he was having some hard times, so Frank said to me, "Hey Angelo, I'm going to send you to Philly." I'm like, "Philly? I don't want to go to Philly. What do I know in Philly?" He said, "You got to go." I said, "Why?" He says, "You got to meet your brothers." My brothers ain't nobody. I'm one of your guys, Frank. He's like, nah. So we got a ticket, and I flew to Philadelphia without Frank. Didn't know anybody, and this guy picks me up at the airport. I was scared to death what he looked like. I was like, "Oh shit!"
Why? He doesn't look.
He's a big teddy bear.
No, so we did that, and then I met Sibora and everybody else, and it was like we knew nothing except the only thing we had in common was the bond of Frank Trejo teaching both of us, and that was how many years ago?
That was
11,
9,
10
10
12?
years.
14 years ago,
Yep.
and now we're still, we're like super brothers now.
He literally just spent. This is how tight the bond is. He told me about 4 months ago, "I'm going to show up to your house about mid-July." He called me finally from the airport. I'm flying to town, and when he got to town, he bought his plane ticket home, and I found out when he was leaving. You
Did he
know.
come to your house too?
I bought a one-way
And
ticket.
you guys
yeah.
are welcome anytime. You guys.
Your house?
I live in the country outside of Philadelphia. I have a nice little guest home. We call it Angelo's apartment. You don't need that. You guys will have your own place. You're welcome to stay. Everybody here is welcome to stay. But the
Okay.
point is that's the kind of bond that we have.
What airport did we fly to?
You're gonna fly into
Philly.
Philadelphia. You fly into Philadelphia, and I will be there to pick you up. And I
Okay.
will not be scary like Angelo said.
Well, I'm not. Is that when we go to Gettysburg from your house?
Yeah.
I will.
Yes.
I will.
My house.
Yeah,
Gettysburg,
I will,
30 minutes.
I will gladly
No, 'cause
be
we
with
have-
you while
we
Sibora
want-
tours
we
you.
want to do
Gettysburg.
that. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
with his camera.
No, you guys look.
No,
I'm
seriously.
extending the invite. You're absolutely welcome.
Yeah.
Like I said, Angela will tell you the amenities are wonderful.
Won't be
You
till
have
next.
your own
Won't be
privacy.
till next year.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. You just have to communicate. We have to coordinate with Angelo because I don't know when his week's going to be.
Just show up.
Yeah.
Yep.
You told us to go there, right?
I do need
I will look. I
work
will.
done, so
I
we're gonna
would
have to
say
talk.
the same thing. Going back to what Stacy's saying, I have been training with these same two guys in Rhode Island for 30+ years. And we're closer than brothers. They're family. They're back home right now.
Yeah.
So to your point, Stacy, this is a unique type of an art that brings people together. It's a brotherhood, and it just lasts, the test of time. Really, it's really unique, and it's fun to keep adding members to the family. So
Yeah.
it's always fun.
And it's all possible for one guy that started it.
Right,
And we're all together.
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, we all had apple pie yesterday. We'd like to serve it.
All right, we'll do that
All
right
right.
after this. This is going to be goodbye, Alana.
Whatever you
It
want
was
to
a
call
great,
it.
whatever you want to call it. It was
you,
great
sir.
spending this time with y'all, and we'll do it again when we have an auspicious crowd like this. And not like this, because this will never happen. Well, I hope it does. I hope it just happens again and again and
Of
again.
course.
Yep.
Can happen
And it can
anytime.
happen anytime, right?
Hey guys, thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan and the lovely Miss Laney and everybody that's here. So thank you.
Can you push finish and post?
All
I
right.
like his contraption.
Yeah.
That was
All right, and then
That was
wait
fun.
a second.
That was a
It's
lot of
going to
fun.
give you another prompt.